Hello, friends. I am Chevy. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic and wonderful. It's late here because we had softball tonight. Monster's been playing softball and the last two nights, and so I just now ate. It's like 9 o'clock or something. I don't know. So I'm a little distracted, as I always am, but still answering some questions. Carl from M20 Games asked me last week. He said, "What is my favorite wood species to work on with projects?" And that's kind of a tough question. My absolute favorite is cherry. Like, I really like the look of cherry. I think his question was actually two-part. I'm going to look because, of course, I didn't prepare, right? I love the look of cherry. I love the warmth. If you don't know, I don't have any cherry scraps in here. Actually, I do. Cherry can be like a very almost blondish color when it's new. This is actually a pretty dark piece. Let's see if I have any that's lighter. It can be fairly blonde when it's fresh and planed. It's never going to be pine blonde. I mean, you compare these two and they're pretty dramatically different. But the thing about cherry is it darkens dramatically under UV light. So once this sits in sun for a little while, it gets this deep kind of brownish red. It's just a really pretty color. On top of that, cherry is a very well-behaved grained wood. And what I mean by that is the grain in cherry isn't all over the place. You don't normally have to combat with a whole bunch of weird situations going over a planer or going through the planer or going over a joiner. You could almost planer joint this in any orientation, any direction, and it wouldn't matter. Some woods, like for instance maple, they have a very specific grain direction that you need to work in. And it's part of the reason is because it's so hard. Cherry is not as hard as maple, but it is a much harder wood than pine, right? So it lasts, and you can make really high quality furniture out of it. And it's not ridiculously expensive. I can get cherry, well, in today's lumber market, I can get cherry cheaper than I can get pine. And that's the truth. Let's see. Carl said, favorite wood species, what genre would what game would I make out of wood? We'll talk about that in a second. So my favorite is cherry. My least favorite is pine. I really don't like working with pine at all. But that being said, I've been having fun with the pine wood decor and furniture type stuff I've been doing for the craft store lately, but not because I'm working in pine, because it's just kind of sloppy, throw it together kind of work that's fun. But pine is very, very sappy, which means I have to clean the blades and my saws all the damn time because they get gummed up from the sap. It's very difficult to stain. It's difficult to just work with. It likes to chip out really easy. It's so soft that any ding, it's painfully obvious. It's actually I've said this before in videos. I think that most people start with pine, and I think that's kind of a mistake because it's very unforgiving. It's really inexpensive, which I think is part of the reason why most people work with it, and it's not intimidating because it's so soft. But because of that softness, it's very, very hard to get crisp, clean cuts in pine. It's very hard to get crisp, clean joinery. It's significantly harder to do that in pine than it is to do it in any other hardwood, maple or cherry or oak or anything that you might want to use. So cherry is my favorite to work with. It's also my favorite visually. I really enjoy the look of it. That being said, though, if money was an issue, I'd build everything out of walnut, just because I've built things out of cherry and then stained it, and to me that's a sin. Carl also asked if I could build a game, a board game, Carl in 20 Games board game community, if I could build a game out of wood, what would it be? And I have built some out of wood. Not necessarily built a whole game out of wood. My original prototype for it was called Doubloons, which was printed by Game Right Games as Scallywags, I did wood coins, and I cut wood coins, and I purchased a stamp, and I stamped them. So I have done wood. But if I were to take a board game and maybe make the board, make the pieces, tokens, and all that stuff myself out of wood, it would honestly, this is going to be a very disappointing answer. It would probably be Settlers of Catan. Not because it's my favorite game ever, but because it has those distinct tile types, the fields, the mountains, the ore, that I could use different wood species to represent those, and it has nice unique pieces that I can make in contrasting species. It would let me experiment with a whole bunch of different colors and species of wood, and nostalgia. Like I've told this story before. Settlers of Catan was the beginning for a whole lot of people my age in board gaming. I was 17 when it came to the United States. That was at Origins of '96, and I was there. I was there when Settlers of Catan first came to America, and it first came to America in German. There was no English print. There was a stapled together rule booklet that was written in English, and that was it. And so, because that was a huge, major turning point in my life, and so I think making that game out of wood would be excellent. If you said, okay, that's obvious, because I feel like that is obvious, that would be a very obvious choice. My next choice would be Acquire. Acquire is, and still has always been, my favorite board game ever. It's the game I rate closest to a 10. It's not quite a 10. There's a few little things, but it's damn close to a 10. And making that out of wood, I mean, early versions are wooden tiles. It would be not super difficult to make the board out of wood, make the tiles out of wood. I would even go so far as to make the stocks out of wood, make the money, chips. Yeah. So there you go. Thanks for that question, Carl. If anybody has any questions about wood species, at this point, I've worked with most of them. 6 years ago, I had never worked with anything but pine. Maybe, no, it's not true. Oak and pine, which are kind of the two woods that you can readily go to Lowe's and get, or Home Depot, is oak and pine. They're basically the woods that are used for interior type stuff. Some places you can get poplar, which is a fine wood to work with. I actually really enjoy working with poplar. But up until like 6 years ago, I really hadn't worked with any other wood species until I met my local Sawyer Mike at Holt Lumber Company here in Fairmont. Holt Lumber Company, he has all of the species, and then I got to explore and play. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. And also, if you could receive a board game, and I'm talking like box and all, that was custom made out of wood, what would you choose? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is flagitious. It's an adjective meaning shamefully wicked or particularly heinous. Now that the paparazzi hangs on her every move, Natasha goes out of her way to engage in flagitious behavior. Flagitious. 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 That's bootylicious. Flagitious? That's a weird one.